Right. There is a country far, far away called Togo, whose Supreme Court didn't get the memo. This is Afro Politico. I'm James Smart.
Marvin Tumbo.
Right. This is Afro Political Africa edition.
Yep.
And enough to talk about Togo, London, and Myanmar. Let's start closer. I'm not sure if it's closer home. I think if you're to go to Togo from Nairobi, you have to go to France or something.
There are countries like that, though.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm not sure. I've never been there, but I could be one of those. But the Togolese had an election a few weeks ago, contested by the opposition, who said that there were irregularities in that election, pointed out to the opposition strongholds where their votes were not counted by the time the presidential votes were being announced. So they went to court, and they had 2 weeks in court, and they had protest all through. We've reported about that, in our subsequent segments on Africa. But we now have the ruling. The Supreme Court there, having considered the petition before them, have said that absolutely that election was free, fair, the best election that has ever been conducted in the history of the world.
I'm not sure they say that.
But
Fact checker.
But here we are. They didn't get the memo. They just didn't get the memo. The Chief Justice David Maraga, the Kenyan Supreme Court, offered them the best excuse ever. Just point to Kenya and say, you know what? Kenya did it, and they'll reference it, and then you walk away from it. But here we are.
They're still waiting for the recent ruling. They had no precedents to refer back to. That's number one. So the memo never got there.
They could have just written to us. We have a lot of tweets that we could have given them on how this thing is done. But anyway, why does it feel? I mean, Togo obviously is in a different political space, different political dispensation, and they had this issue with a long-serving president, and then now the son. And it just feels like one of those typical African stories, where institutions are actually just bowing down to the big guy in office instead of the other way around.
Why does that have to be the case? Why are you assuming that was the case?
That was the case in this particular matter. They have a constitution whereby they don't have term limits, okay? And a president that. I mean, there are certain points, there's certain areas in terms of politics when you look at a country and you see, hang on, this country, this particular issue disqualifies or starts to erode democracy. And part of it is the question which we agreed, the question of term limits. Mm-hmm. That it's not possible that one person be the bearer of vision for a country for 50, 60 years. It's just not possible.
I agree.
Right? And that is the situation that they have. So they obviously live in a very different political, democratic dispensation where elections for them are supposed to be uneventful. They're supposed to confirm this person is in office. So the Supreme Court decision is not so much of a surprise that the Supreme Court there decided the way they did, because that institution gets its authority from the president as opposed from the people.
I think I can't speak authoritatively around the legal about Togo.
Just in comparison.
Yeah, but also remember you're comparing a country that got a new constitution just a few years ago. So in terms of progressive,
we also had that constitution a few years ago.
No, I mean us.
Yes,
not them.
All right.
So if we are comparing them
they
to us,
theirs also a few years ago.
Are you serious?
Yes.
When?
They moved from 1992 constitution, which had term limits,
mm-hmm.
and the other day they just instituted this.
No,
they removed the term limits. They moved the term limits. They didn't have a new constitution. They just removed it. Yes,
that's
you're
the
right.
Point.
Yeah.
So if we are very progressive in terms of our laws, yeah, and I think we have to take that in consideration when you compare certain countries, and then also even go the world over. There's a reason you've only had 4 presidential results annulled across the world. That does not mean even in the U.S., you had a court petition in
Florida.
In Florida,
Yeah.
Now, which did not overturn the results, as many people felt it should have. Yeah.
Actually, I didn't even look at that petition. It just took out the technicality.
Precisely. Now, which is why I think we are a special case, not in the normal.
Why do you always talk this about stuff? It's like a sad thing. You just
No, I mean, we are a special. Okay, not a special case, but I say a special country because special case means mental. In certain discussions, I mean, we are a special country because we've had a new constitution. We have certain freedoms here that most people don't enjoy in many places. We have certain media freedoms, certain legal, judicial, litigation freedoms.
And that's a good thing, Marvin. Just as you make
it is a good thing.
Yes.
I'm not complaining about it.
All right, good. I'm just making sure.
I'm saying the reason this court ruling happened here is because we have the kind of laws, we have the kind of media freedom, we have the kind of infrastructure that would support a judiciary to act in the way that it did.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But that also is not to say that what the Supreme Court did there is not in accordance, because at the end of the day, they are directed by the Constitution, and if the Constitution says this is a threshold in terms of reasonable doubt, they have to go by their laws. We can't judge them based on our laws.
That is true.
Yeah.
The point I think I'm arriving at Togo, because I think Togo and their progressives and the opposition and the people involved in politics there, they looked at what happened in Kenya as a beacon of, something that can happen in their country too. Mm-hmm. All right. They felt as they were fighting this, going to an election to hopefully try and overturn this election. The hope was that, supposing there were issues with their election, that the world was in a place whereby they are of accepting that it's possible that you go to some sort of a court. Well, it could be a kangaroo court for all anyone cares. Mm-hmm. But the fact that it is called a court of law, that they can get some reprieve out of it. And that appears now to be out of the window. Okay? Now, they would have to go to the normal ways that the country did, to look for other means and ways to get their country into a place whereby they're comfortable in terms of democracy. In that view that they either institute more powers to the constitution, mm-hmm. that their courts are actually receiving powers from the people, as opposed to the big man in power or in their version of state house or whatever it is, and their institutions are guaranteed that kind of powers, and that's a difficult and a very lonely journey, because naturally, and I've seen this, and especially in this country, that naturally, when you start to stand against the status quo, it's very easy for you to be ostracized. And we've seen it in the people who, in their streets, who have been beaten up, the women who showed up, and the young people who showed up to ask for, a different interpretation, sort of thing. And sometimes you argued about, Africa coming into this place whereby there's a difference of something that is happening, But when something like this happens, like in Togo, then you start seeing that we might be 2 steps forward, but other countries are 2 steps back.
That's where we are at, and I think what you'll see going forward, and especially when you start having these types of precedents being locally available, and by locally I mean continental, I think there's something, we are the beacon, to look up to in terms of progress across many areas.
Right.
Yeah. And I think more and more countries would be better positioned in terms of looking at changing their constitutions to be more reflective of the times. Yeah. Because, as I said even earlier, a lot of our laws were pre-independence laws. Yeah. a lot of them were pre-independence laws, and you just have this patchwork, yeah, that has happened over so many years to an extent where you don't even recognize what is what. So I think a more important question on the continent is, can we start to even review, especially if we are running on immediate post-colonial constitutions, yeah? If you are running on post-colonial laws, immediate post-colonial laws, is we need to say, okay, can we start making laws that are more reflective, that are more progressive, that give us a better grounding to progress our countries? I think that's important. I think Kenya offers that chance and case study.
Brilliant. And
That's why we are a special case.
Special country, Marvin.
Special country.
Good. Moving closer, and in Uganda, the president's party, NRM, National Resistance Movement, has finally delivered their long-awaited secret. We all knew they were going to bring it, and they did. And now they are scrapping the presidential term age. Okay? So, the context into this, Museveni is moving past 75. And he's always been held, that there are two things. Uganda has term limits, which they remove the term limits first. No, they don't have term limits. They remove the term limits first. There are much more problems than I had realized. They remove term limits. Then the other side thought, well, we can still kick him out by the technicality of age. But lo and behold, they just didn't know that Museveni has a lot of tricks, in the back of his hands. So here he is. His party has pushed to remove the age limit from the constitution, which means the import of that is Museveni will run again, and obviously Museveni will win. But the biggest thing that I've seen him quote in the press, he's saying that he's asking anyone who's against that move to go and do a medical study and bring to him evidence or thesis of any leader past 75 who could not perform. And that is his biggest take home. Since no one has ever done it, then he's very ready and willing to go. But seriously though, what's going on in Uganda? What's happening?
Same point to admit, you have countries that are led by the rule of law. You have countries that are led by rule by law. Rule of law, it means even the leaders of the country
Are under the law.
Yeah. Rule by law is everybody else except the leaders of the country. Yeah. So that's something very difficult to change. Yeah. It's something very difficult to change, and because it goes back a long way, and when you look at even the history of nations, you can be able to point out certain countries based on how they came into democracy. Yeah, if they came through wars, they came through coups.
Yeah,
yeah, there is a certain line they'll always take. Yeah, and that one you can see repeated in many areas. So I think I'm not surprised by it. Yeah, I was not surprised by Rwanda, and I'll not be surprised by many more. Even try such.
So just to think about, if they're young people and if the opposition in Uganda, what's the best route to come out of it? Because obviously you have someone in office who will never leave office. This is just the truth. Museveni will never leave office, and his continual staying in office is becoming not only untenable, but is seriously weighing the country down. That the country cannot move fundamental things forward because of this one man. All right. How would you advise, say, the opposition or anyone else would say, surely something has to give, because as it is, this fellow is going to stay in office for the next 20, 30 years, and it's going to be another Mugabe until he's 97 or whatever,
It's a complex situation because if you have the laws bending towards the will of an individual, and the laws are the guiding principles of a country, it's clearly it's No, I know it's very, very, very difficult. And it's why Mugabe has even survived this long. It's because the law has always bent towards his will, his direction. I think in a lot of these situations, what you want is change that starts within the NRM party itself. Yeah.
Can they really have change? That party doesn't look to be a party that has any difference of ideas. That people don't come in and bring in the ideas. It sort of looks like Museveni's, own kitchen. He picks and chooses who gets in that party and whatever it is. So
the former prime minister ran against his former boss. Yeah,
he got merely, I think, less than 2% of votes.
He did, but my point is there can be difference of opinion to an extent where a section can say, look, we are willing to lose our seats. We are willing to have, because at the end of the day, the moment you start creating these kinds of shifts, what immediately would follow is being kicked out of the party or something of the sort. But there has to be someone, because here's the thing. The only way you build yourself to that stature is being a rebel within such an institution, but with a cause that can make you what do you call it? With a cause that's larger than you.
Right.
Yeah. If it comes from outside, it's easily dismissed. You can easily dismiss it. Yeah, it's just some other guy. It's just some other person. But when it comes from inside, and you can be able to build enough kind of support of at least some key legislators and say, look, we've been here. We've seen how it works. You have certain justifications to say we can actually get out of this and create. And
so what I'm hearing you say is this, that you cannot defeat NRM unless you're on the inside. Yep. Okay? So the biggest political opponent in Uganda is Kizza Besigye,
yep.
Obviously. Wouldn't it be very difficult for him to feign some sort of, friendship at this point? Because can't beat them. So join them. Say, you know what? Form some sort of... Because Museveni needs to win the next election. He's looking to win the next election. And elements know that they're going to have a lot of difficulty.
A lot could happen.
Yeah. So could it not be incumbent upon him to say, you know what? Feign some sort of friendship and say, you know what? This country has to move forward and let's strengthen this institution called political party and join Museveni and join the party from inside. Then he has the institution, because now he'll be supported. He'll possibly be a minister of sorts or whatever it is. Then he can start convincing these elements inside the party from inside to sort of start having these different of ideas of, we can actually call for a conference just before the election and ask Museveni and someone else to stand against him. And of course, he's going to, to not accept it in many ways. But that's what you want. You want the party to break from inside.
That can only happen in a Nigerian movie.
That happened in Kenya. Raila Odinga destroyed Kanu by coming into Kanu in 98.
Also, we'll need to get certain facts straight with regard to the Kanu situation, which we'll talk more, because right now it will take us a bit back.
No. Just mention it like a one-liner. Didn't Raila Odinga join Kanu in 98?
Yes.
Didn't he live in 2001?
Yes.
Didn't he live with almost everyone else in 2001?
Yes. Did
Kanu not lose the election in 2002?
There are certain conversations also that happen outside that particular space that need to be mentioned. But the point being, yeah.
No, I was talking about the overall strategy.
Yes, which is why I'm saying, yeah. First of all, Besigye himself, he's not the best placed person to actually lead that.
Not? Why not?
Because here's the thing. In his party, even he himself, he had resigned and said he's not going to run again.
And he ran again.
And then he came back and said, only I.
That's a moral question. I know. It's a moral question. But there's no term limits in running and losing. That's what I mean. If you run
also,
and win.
If you say within our party, yeah, I'm not going to run again. I want to bring up young leaders, and then I come and say, no, you're not good enough. Marvin, I'm going to run.
Marvin, it's only idiots who don't change their minds. And you can't.
Okay, then Museveni as well has changed his mind about
But we have a we have a constitution here, Marvin. No. We have a constitution here, right? We are agreeing about certain fundamental principles about how our country is run. Okay, here's a political party, and he said, "Well, this is my last run." I interviewed him, I think, in 2001, and he was very convinced that was his last run, and he did his last run, and he was defeated, and he said that was it, and he left. He came back and said, "No, I still have energy. I can still participate in politics." And somehow I still managed to convince those people because he got more votes in the last election than he did in the previous election. All right? So it's a moral question, yes. And I would not use that to dismiss him entirely. Dismiss him about anything else, but not on that point.
When you have the reason I said it's only possible in a Nigerian movie, is because, first of all, the way you've explained it is how, if I was Museveni, I would expect it.
No, we're coming to support you.
Yeah, right.
We're coming to support you.
Yes.
Hang on.
It's what you need, a curveball. Yeah. You need a curveball. You need something that he doesn't see coming. Something that he doesn't expect.
There's nothing. Museveni controls, the state controls anything and everything, including the flies that fly out of Uganda, inside Uganda, into Lake Victoria. He controls everything. Let's move to the next point. We'll definitely stay on this point forever and ever. But let's move to, again, I remember this, closer home, Tanzania, and opposition chief whip was shot in his house. People walked into his house, shot in the stomach, and I think the leg. He was flown into Nairobi, I think a day or so later. Yeah. He's in Nairobi hospital in critical conditions. Of course, the opposition is blaming President Magufuli and his party for this act. I've never had this from Tanzania. I've had this from Uganda. I've had this from Kenya. I expect it in almost every other African country except Tanzania. What's going on?
I think the reason you've been expecting it from Tanzania more than any other place is that look at their presidents. All of their presidents have had this kind of gentleman talk, gentleman tone, gentleman approach in terms of even how they speak. They have been very conciliatory in how they talk to the public, in how they debate, in how Magufuli is not that. Yeah. And a lot of, and might not be as conjecture, but the problem when you have certain situations is that same thing we're talking about even Ngujiri here. You have people who take certain statements or pronouncements and think, you know what would make the president look good? Is this chief whip is giving us too much trouble.
So kill him?
So, no, but it can be someone whose flawed logic tells him that this guy is a problem to the president. The president has said 1, 2, 3. I think the kind of tone that you are hearing in Tanzanian politics is starting to reflect the tone that you hear almost everywhere else on the continent, where elections and the process of governing and government is more or less is a fight. Yeah. But back then you would not hear this, especially from the president. Yeah. But now I think for me,
so you sort of agree that there's some presidential habits that you must have, and now you're coming around. Marvin has really come around, ladies and gentlemen. Please toast to that, man. You've really come a long way, and we appreciate Marvin. All right, let's get to the final point, and we have to move further and further afield into Myanmar. How do you call it? Myanmar. And we're talking about the Rohingyas, Muslims who are a community being swept away from where they're the countrysides, being pushed almost into Bangladesh. And the soldiers are moving behind them and are planting, these landmines so that they cannot come back. But that's not the story. Well, that's not the end of it. That's just half of it. The other half is there is a Nobel Peace Prize
President.
as president, someone who the world knows, someone who the world has vouched for, Aung San Suu Kyi. And she has totally not spoken about it or made really comments that are making the whole situation light. And now she's even said that she's not going to the UN, for the meeting because, of course, she realizes that she's going to be, attacked on that. And I just, it's a big sense of loss that this could be happening in the world today. I mean, just the other day we were talking about, these huge numbers and droves of people, at the seas, at the high seas, drowning. And we had this political situation whereby the politicians that don't want to say the right things, or they think if they say that, those are humans too and we should accommodate them and we should save them or whatever. So we have this situation in Myanmar, which the world is just treating it as, well, it's terrible, it's so sad. I mean, come on, look at those guys. And then everyone moves on like nothing has happened.
I have a problem usually, and there's this, and I'm going to anger a lot of people with this in terms of my thinking around people who have not been or had the experience of government. Yeah?
All right.
So you have a Nobel Peace Prize winner who comes with this reputation, yeah, big reputation into a presidency, yeah, but you have not had experience of government, yeah, you don't know how government is run, and then the assumption is, because when you are outside looking in, it's very easy to point.
Right.
It's very easy to say, but you need to legislate laws that will
Change
do
that,
X,
change
Y,
that,
Z.
change that.
Change this, change that,
Right.
push that, implement this.
Yeah.
Until you get into government, that you realize it will take you a few months just to get the laws
Or years.
in parliament. Even logically. So months to get the laws, for them to be debated. Yeah. Once they are debated, for it to be signed. Yeah. If it is passed, for that matter, for it to be signed. So what do you need to have? You need to have certain political majorities. Those political majorities, it's a give and take. I'm going to support you on this if you did it. So there are certain trades that happen, even at bill levels, for you to get certain, for you to get these things to be passed.
Right.
Now, once you get there, now you have to sign them into law. And once you sign them into law, it will take probably another year in terms of public participation for you to develop the regulations that will actualize and operationalize that law. So you are looking at maybe 2 years, but when you are out here, you say, you need to change this, you need to change that. But the process of government, that's why when you say government, you govern in prose, it's because that's what it takes. Now, the process of government is much more difficult when you are the one now leading, because it means you have to appreciate all this. You have to have enough vision and foresight to say, these are the kinds of laws, this is the kind of life, this is the kind of situation you need to have. This is how I need to organize the military. Yeah? This is how I need to organize the military for them to listen to me, for them to act in a certain way and whatnot. But now you find a neophyte as well in this situation, and I can't say that she's unwilling to do it.
She's incompetent.
She's too incompetent to do it. She probably doesn't even know what to do.
And this, I mean, to just buttress your point, the question this brings on then is, you have these leaders, someone like Aung San Suu Kyi, who has been created purely by media, created by the West, created by the democracy, or this iconism, I'd like to call it, of where the West picks certain leaders in certain regions and say, this is the trait, this is the person, this is what you need to look for. Yes. Because Aung San Suu Kyi has been created out of that. Now, out of that, you come someone who obviously is unprepared to deal with the difficult job of government, but here's about human beings. Here's about level human beings, about you standing up, okay, in that position, because being in office and being a president or prime minister or whatever gives you one thing: it buys you a bully pulpit, all right, where you can stand and people would listen to you. That's what it does. It doesn't matter whether you're president of Eritrea or whatever it is. When you speak, people would listen, okay? Now, if she refuses to use that position to do the very least, which is to speak, okay, at the end of it all, she has this difficult job of how to fix it. The fixing it is different. The speaking about it is very different, okay? But the speaking it when you're in office, I think carries some weight.
But who are you speaking to?
Now, the problem is that I think she's not understood how to deal with the military juntas, all right? And there's this conflict because the military still are the ones with executive power.
Exactly.
And she has this ceremonial power, so she still can't do so much. But I think, and from where I sit, Aung San Suu Kyi's voice would have come immediately. These issues are coming up and saying this is wrong. This is something that we'd not subscribe to as human beings. And then retreat and start to fix it or look for ways to fix it. It would have carried more weight. As it is now, we're all saying, look, we have someone who obviously doesn't care about fellow human beings. And that's what it's coming off as.
I think the power is not with her.
Obviously, of course not.
She has a name and she'll take a majority of the blame. But that's the entire point, is that in these situations, the reason you become president is because you have a certain constituency behind you that believes in you, and that constituency is both a political constituency in terms of the kind of leaders who can help you implement your agenda,
of course.
And the people who support you, who voted for you. Now, if you've not had the experience and time to build such a coalition or such a constituency, it will be very difficult to govern.
All right. That should be a good place to end Afro Politico, the Africa edition this week. We've spoken a lot about in the region, outside the region, as far as Myanmar. We'll do it all over again next week, right here on this channel. I'm James Smart.
I'm Marvin Tumbo.
All right.
Yes, man. Left me hanging, man. You're not hungry.